All these verses together deal with one central topic. And those topics are, first, what is the highest reality to be realized? And the highest reality is the eternal, all-pervading, divine spark that is present in all of us, that is present everywhere, that is the basis of everything, that is beyond explanation, beyond verbalization, beyond definition and description. The highest reality is the eternal, all-pervading, divine spark that is present in all of us, that is present everywhere, that is the basis of everything, that is beyond explanation, beyond verbalization, beyond definition and description. The highest reality is the eternal, all-pervading, divine spark. There is a sense of humor at all of us that is present everywhere. That is the basis of everything. You need some entertainment also in the midst of this profound discussion of philosophy, beyond definition and description. The highest reality is the eternal, all-pervading, divine spark. There is a sense of humor at all of us that is present everywhere. That is the basis of everything. You need some entertainment also in the midst of profound discussion of philosophy, beyond definition and description. The highest reality is the eternal, all-pervading, divine spark. Please don't mind, but you can. So anyway, I'll repeat again. So the idea is put in the 18th verse. So we are not straight away going to the 18th verse, but the 18th verse is very important, and also the 12th verse. So you find a central topic, a very important topic is discussed elaborately again. So from 12 to 18. The idea is put in the very interesting. So we are not because this is an ancient work. But so the 18th verse is very important. Study the entire book to understand what topic and the different verses in different chapters actually deal with. From 12 to 18. See, the 18th verse, for example, it says, because this is an ancient work. What are the qualities necessary for study the entire book to understand spiritual enlightenment? It's called jnanam, the tools, the means for spiritual enlightenment. So you find that's mentioned from 7 to 11th verse. What are the so if you look at these verses from 7 to 11, you find spiritual enlightenment. It's called jnanam, the tools, the means for spiritual enlightenment. So you find that's mentioned, there are from 7 to 11th important characteristics are mentioned. For example, amanitvam, you find, it means humility, lack of egoism, non-violence, then straightforwardness. There are peace, respect for teachers, internal purity, characteristics, stability, self-control, then an ability to detach oneself from the objects of sense enjoyments, then total freedom from egoism, and also the ability to look at the entire life and this entire transmigratory cycle. Being born, going through different experiences, pain and pleasure, happiness and enjoyment, and again taking birth again, this boring, endless wheel, rotating wheel, transmigratory Buddha call it. So wheel. How to get out of this and realize our eternal nature. So and then of course detachment. And again, all these are mentioned here. Almost endless 20 wheel, rotating. Which are the tools or instruments for spiritual enlightenment. And then eternal nature. It's also mentioned and then what is to be known. All these are mentioned here. What is to be known, that's the all-pervading divine reality, instruments is to be known, spiritual. So, and also what is Kshetra, and then what is the empirical world, the phenomenal world, that is also mentioned here. You find at the very beginning, Mahabhudani Ahamkara Buddhiravyaktam. Buddhiravyaktamevacha Indriyani Dishaigancha Panchajendriya Gocharaha. So it's something that I discussed. I know it needs some repetition, but it means that is also mentioned here. According to Sankhya philosophy, Mahabhutani Ahamkara Buddhiravyaktam school of Indian philosophy. Buddhiravyaktamevacha Indriyani Visaigancha Panchachendriya Gochara. Different from Vedanta. It's something from what we are discussing. I know it is a kind of repetition, well, half materialistic philosophy. According to Sankhya philosophy, there was an Indian school of materialism which was much more of a rigid materialism that you find in modern times. Different from kind of extreme utilitarianism. It is a kind of existed in ancient India. Half materialistic philosophy. Not completely materialistic. Its earliest texts go back to 3rd millennium BC. Much more of a rigid materialism. But this is different. Sankhya philosophy is not like that. But Sankhya philosophy doesn't talk about the kind of liberation. Its earliest enlightenment that Vedanta or Buddhism or even the Abrahamic religion, Christianity, Sankhya philosophy is not the reaching, but Sankhya philosophy, the close proximity of the divine God. It doesn't talk about. It talks about our evolution, enlightenment from matter, Vedanta or Buddhism, and then or even going through different cycles of evolution. And right up to the 5 senses. And I have described this elaborately in my lectures on Yoga Sutras, which we did. There are 2 versions of Yoga Sutra lectures that you find in the YouTube in our system. And then the one which is delivered in classes began in Stanford, Hindu Students Association. Later it had to be switched over to online, and it was concluded. There are 2 versions of Yoga Sutra lectures that you find in the YouTube in our system. So the one so that's delivered, one that actually deals with the Sankhyan system of philosophy. We can call it Indian school of evolutionism. It's an interesting thing. So that's what we are talking about. Concluded all these 24 elements which constitute this empirical world. So that's one. Which includes actually deals with the our ego system, our senses of perception, senses of action, our intellect, mind. All these are put under the category of matter. All these 24 elements which constitute, they are all evolutes of Prakriti, which is essentially matter. Which includes, and there's another important category, is Purusha, which is self, our intellect, mind. So all these together constitute Kshetra, matter. And Kshetrajna is the divine reality present. They are all evolutes of Prakriti, the one which is essentially the knower of this field, is beyond the field, which only witness of the field. Actually, according to this, there is a witness within us. That witness is seeing, is witnessing all that we are doing. That soul, the Atman, the divine, is not involved in any kind of actions. Actually, it remains, according to this, there is a witness within us. Actions are done at the level of the empirical. Our mind and senses are involved in actions. But that soul, behind this, there is that the divine is not transcendental in any kind of reality. It remains. So all these are mentioned here in the 18th verse. So that's not the subject right now. Our mind and senses. The whole discussion begins with the 12th verse. If you look at the 12th verse of those who can just imagine, the 12th verse is very famous, very important. That's that actually. So all these are mentioned. It's a very important concept of Vedanta right now, in a nutshell. No, see, the whole discussion begins with the 12th verse. If you look at the 12th verse, param Brahma, nasat. The 12th verse is very famous, very important. So see that actually. So I shall explain this. Puts a very important concept of Vedanta. Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, I am going to discuss with you, I am going to teach you now that absolute spiritual truth, which alone is to be realized, which alone is to be known. And by realizing that, you will become immortal, you will become eternal, you will truth attain deathlessness. That's the literal translation of Amrtatvam. Mrta means realizing that Amrtatvam means deathlessness. So how we all can become deathless? You will go beyond death, transcend deathlessness. That is the topic discussed in the first line of that 12th verse. I am going to teach you now the secret. So how we all can become deathless? The second verse, it is beyond understanding by touch, smell, taste, what seeing. It means is, so all the five senses are involved. Beginningless. If one sense is mentioned in certain it means Atman is beyond it is called the six changes, the logic of implication. Beginning with birth. Okay. Now, because birth itself is a transition from a state of beginningless, empirical non-existence into a state of existence. Something comes into existence, like a pot comes into existence. Beginning with when a pot maker makes a pot. A chair comes into existence. Because when a carpenter makes a chair from a empirical non-existence into a state of and then exists. Something comes into and existence. Then it goes like changes. Comes into existence. Of course, living human beings, living animals, a chair they go through these changes of birth. When a carpenter makes existing, chair growth, evolution, something like that, and then decay and death. And then it goes and changes. Vedanta and Buddhism will tell you, of course, living human beings, living so this animals, is this cycle. They go through these changes if of birth, Atman is mentioned to be beginningless, that's a word used for English translation evolution. Of the 12th verse, means it is beyond all these changes. And death. It is and Vedanta and beyond Buddhism time. Will tell you rebirth. Beyond the concept of time. So this is this cycle. Actually, when we realize our deathless dimension, to be we transcend beginningless. Time. That's a word used for English translation. We don't reject time, means but we realize that we are the divine, all-pervading reality beyond time. That is not defined. The concept that is not confined or limited by time, our deathless dimension, or causation. We transcend. The second word used is param. Param means something that cannot be seen or experienced or known by any of the tools of epistemology. Not epistemology, the science, confined theory of limited by time, space, direct perception, inference. The second word used is param. Comparison, param means something that cannot be seen or experienced or known and negation. These are the tools of epistemology. Important tools into epistemology. The six of the broadest. But this is extended inference up to 10. Sambhava, Itihya, Cheshta and Parisesha. These are not for us, but if you are really interested in this elaborate epistemology, you can ask questions during interaction. You'll be surprised, of course, comparative philosophers are this is when first in late 18th century, when many of the European Indologists started studying, really interested in this elaborate epistemology, 10 you can ask questions. Principles of epistemology. You'll be surprised, of course, compared to 3 or 4 maximum. Extended 4. In the late 18th century, the original Western thought. So in the sense of this. So this truth is beyond knowledge because it is our true nature. But knowing means you come to know something by using your mind and any of these tools of perception or knowing. So Atman cannot be known. So this truth is beyond. Vedanta tells you that if it is our true nature, if somebody tells you means I have seen God, you can be sure he has not seen God. He has seen everything any of these tools of because God can only be experienced in the highest sense. Atman cannot be known like that. This may offend many people. Vedanta tells you that videos, when they met God in a surgery, I've seen God, session, you can be sure he has not seen out immediately. God came and had some discussion. Because God can only you can many such things. So really, if somebody tells you, this may offend many people. I've seen God, or I have realized God, met God in a surgery. The point is, what it means, you should understand. If he's a mystic, you can many such things. The meaning that will attach to the word I've seen will be different from the meaning that we normally use in our conversation. The point is, because what it means can only be experienced as an infinite, as an inexplicable experience. The meaning that you will attach, and then you can say will be different from the meaning that we normally use in our. It is not conversation by saying, not like saying that I've seen a car can only be experienced as an train, as an inexplicable. So beyond with heart. epistemology beyond. It's called Sarva Pramana Avati. Sarva Pramana Atida in Sanskrit, technical language. By saying, not like saying that I've seen tools of epistemology. The third word used is Anadimat Param Brahma. So Brahma means all-pervading, omnipresent. Beyond, it's called Vyapnodi, means pervading everywhere. So these three terms are used in the second line of the 12th verse. But we will discuss that. In fact, the coming verses will be an expansion of that idea. But before that, the important principle, the important idea. So these three terms are used in the second line of the first part of this verse. But we will discuss that. The coming verses will be an expansion of that idea. I am now going to tell you that, or explain to you, or expound to you, principle, that supreme truth that will help you to realize your deathless dimension. What is the deathless dimension? The most important, the most celebrated discussion of this subject comes in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. That supreme in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad that will help you to realize in the your deathless is called Yajnavalkya Maitreyi Samvada. The most important, the most celebrated discussion of this subject comes in the Brihadaranyaka. I mentioned his name in last session. He was a great philosopher. It comes in two. Gargi was another great philosopher. But here there is a discussion between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. Actually, in their home, there is a discussion with the husband and last session. And that discussion is a celebrated part. Gargi was another great philosopher. What is the discussion? But here there is a discussion between Yajnavalkya and Maitreyi. He was a great philosopher, a celebrated man. He was so famous. He was a teacher of the greatest emperor of his times, Janaka. And that discussion is a celebrated part. One day he decided, well, now, what is the discussion? Retire now, to hermitage in the forest alone. A great philosopher, a celebrated man. I shall go and become a monk, so become a mendicant. He was a teacher of the greatest emperor of his time. Buddha became a monk. He was a married man and left his home, his palace, and he became a monk. So Yajnavalkya also was a highly enlightened man. So he found no meaning in continuing life in his home with all, he had a lot of properties. In those days means lots of cows, this means. So he told his wife, I'm handing over to you all this. Let me retire and become a monk. Yajnavalkya. He was fairly old. He was a fairly enlightened man. So I'm going to give you all the property. The statement is, Sahovaja Maitreyi. Anyway, Maitreyi idi hovaja Yajnavalkya Udyasan va are aham asmat sthana dasmi handate anaya katyayanyandam karavani. Anyway, so he called Maitreyi, and in fact, surprisingly, if you go to the story, you find Yajnavalkya had two wives. It was common in those days, perhaps during the early Vedic period. So Katyayani was one wife and Maitreyi another one. Katyayani was a very pious person, but she was not a philosopher. But other one was a great philosopher. So Yajnavalkya told Maitreyi, okay, I'm going to hand over to you all the property. So Maitreyi became suspicious because Yajnavalkya wanted to give her something that he himself wanted to renounce. That was certainly not very. So she thought there was something much higher than wealth that Yajnavalkya her husband was seeking, So the statement is second mantra, though, so you can read at least the translations, you can see. Sahovaja Maitreyi yennu me yam bhago sarva prithvi vittena purnasya katham tena amudasyam iti. Maitreyi put this question. Suppose you give me all the wealth that I can get. Suppose you give me all the wealth that I can ask for. Actually, what it means, sarva prithvi vittena purnasyad. Suppose the whole earth becomes mine. Suppose the entire globe becomes mine, so that you give me all the wealth. Is that going to make me perfect? That's a question his wife is asking. The reason why she asked this question was, she thought Yajnavalkya was giving her something that he himself was renouncing, and he was renouncing all these in order to get something that's much more precious than wealth. So what is that precious thing which he was seeking, which he was trying to obtain by giving up all the wealth? That I want. This is why wife asked a question. So she's Naidi Hovaja Yajnavalkya. So she asked the question, suppose you give me the whole earth filled with wealth, is that going to make me immortal? Amrita Syam iti means, is that going to make me deathless? Because with all the wealth that you give me, one day I have to leave all the wealth behind. I have to, you may give me all the wealth, but one day I have to give up all this. So her question is, Katham tena amrutasyam. The word comes here in amrita. Amrita means deathless. Then Yajnavalkya says, Na iti hovaja Yajnavalkya, yathaiva upakaranavadam jividam tathaiva te jividam syat amrutattasya tu na asha asti vittena iti. Amrutattasya tu na asha asti vittena iti. He said, no. Even if we get all the wealth, you are not going to get anything other than what wealth can buy. Nothing more. And wealth cannot buy deathlessness. So Yajnavalkya says, you cannot expect to become deathless by acquiring all the wealth. Then his wife asked him to teach him the way to attain deathlessness. And how does he teach that? She first of all tests her, but lady is a very learned, very refined, very spiritual person, very learned person. So finally he finds her that his wife is a wonderful person. Then he teaches her the whole spiritual philosophy of Upanishads, which will teach us that behind this body, behind this mind, behind this intellect, behind this mind-body complex, there is one eternal, all-pervading, visual inner divine spark. And that is eternal, that is deathless, because it is eternal. It doesn't come into existence. So it doesn't cease to exist. It always exists. It's eternal. So once we recognize and realize our own deathless, that is true identity, deathless dimension, then we are deathless. Deathlessness is not possible for anyone at the physical level. Jadasya dhruva murtihu dhruvam janma murdasya ja. And the Gita says elsewhere, in the Bhagavad Gita itself, the second chapter, he says, anyone who is born is bound to die at the physical level. But suppose you realize you are not this body, and suppose you realize this can happen only when we practice spiritual disciplines for long years, maybe for several life cycles. Buddha himself took 544 life cycles. So, once we realize that, then we become identified with our own deathless dimension. So that's the meaning of Amrutam. So the 12th verse is very, very, very important. The whole discussion from now up to 18th verse is an expansion of this idea. And then how do we realize this? It's already mentioned here from 7th verse to 11th verse, all these spiritual qualities. If you read these verses from 7 to 11, you find what Lord Krishna is speaking about are certain qualities that will make us truly humane and truly human. Compassion, absence of pride, absence of egotism, politeness, humility, looking upon everyone as one spiritual family, looking upon everything as one spiritual entity. All these spiritual qualities that you can think of. Once you get all these spiritual qualities, then you find we slowly start moving inward, and slowly we realize behind this body, behind this mind, behind all this, there is something within us. Actually, that's why spiritual disciplines sometimes come to help people who are affected by diseases. You often find people in hospice, medical professional, sometimes will request, because if anyone thinks that is just this human body, that death is the most terrible thing that you can think of. Because you are leaving everything behind. I mentioned earlier, if any person thinks that he's just a physical body, just like a billionaire thinking that he's a homeless person, so he thinks that he has nothing, so he's asking somebody to give a few cents, but he has billions of dollars in the bank. That's our true dimension. I mean, we are the deathless, real, eternal reality. So, but then how do we attain this? We can do this by prayer, meditation, and you find if you, any religion for the matter you take, Hinduism, Vedanta, Christianity, Judaism, anything, Buddhism you take, all these qualities mentioned between the 7th and 11th verse, all these are wonderful human qualities. These are natural for every spiritual seeker. And as we acquire more and more of these qualities, we will start moving and traveling towards our own true nature, our own eternal nature, Atman. So, that's an important subject here. We discussed this, so I already mentioned this earlier, but we discussed these 20 different qualities. That is humility, not looking for reputation, a lack of pride, non-violence, and also steadiness, stability, straightforwardness, respect for others, purity of mind, thought and word and deed, everything, and also unwavering stability and steadiness, sense control, freedom from infatuations, freedom from desire for sensory enjoyments, and then not having extreme liking and extreme dislike, freedom from extreme obsession or infatuation for certain things and extreme hatred of certain things, and also looking upon material life as something incomplete, something to be transcended, extending our love and compassion beyond our own family, beyond our own immediate circles. So all these are some of the qualities which are natural for any person in any tradition who turn to spiritual life. This is an important thing to remember. These are the tools to realize our own deathless dimension. Then we already discussed the verses from 13, 14, 15, 16. These are a little bit philosophical. I shall try to give briefly, I shall go through. The 13th verse is Sarvada Panipadam da Sarvadokshi Shiromukham Sarvada Sudimalloge Sarvamavrute Tishtadi Sarvendri Gunabhasam Sarvendri Vivarjidam Asaktam Sarvabhuchaiva Nirgunam Gunabhoktrija, Kshetra. But it says the poetry here is really grand. So you can imagine. Literal translation, he has hands everywhere, eyes everywhere, face everywhere. It is all-pervading. So the all-pervading nature of this spiritual reality is expressed in the language of allegory, imagery, and also a kind of grand picturesque descriptions. So instead of saying God is everywhere. It's a simple statement. It means everything in this world, all the hands and heads and eyes and face of all human beings are the hands and heads and eyes of God. Means the all-pervading nature, the omnipresence of the divine is mentioned in the language of metaphors, allegories, and of course imageries. Again, that divine spark is present within and without, is present in among all things, both moving and unmoving. It is sukshmatva tad avijneyam, durastam cha andike tad. That is the 15th verse. Sukshmatva tad avijneyam. It is so subtle that cannot be known. What it means is, those who are not endowed with a spiritual outlook. This is the third. This is, please remember, this is the 15th verse, second line. Sukshmatvat tat avijneyam. Durastham cha andike chatat. What it means is, it is so subtle. Those who don't have a spiritual attitude, for them, this realization, this spiritual enlightenment is far, far away. But those who are pure in heart, it is nearest to them. Why? Because the divine spark is present in all of us. It can never be far away. But if a person is interested, driven only by worldly pleasures, worldly enjoyments, spirituality is so distant from him, when it is so far away. So that is a general principle. Those who are pure, it is nearest. Those who are insincere, those who are not endowed with a spiritual outlook, God is as far as you can think of, farthest from them. That's the idea behind. Avibhaktam cha bhudeshu vibhaktam iva cha sthidam bhuda bhartru cha tat jneyam gasishnu prabhavishnu cha. This needs to get some explanations. What it means is, actually, avibhaktam, the divine reality is present in everything and present everywhere. So it is one, undivided. But at the same time, apparently you find every individual human beings are different from each other. So it appears to be divided, but actually it is undivided. Depending upon our own accumulated samskaras, tendencies and impressions, and our own level of mental purity, the divine spark manifests within us. We are able to connect ourselves with our own spiritual dimension to the extent that we are ready for it, to the extent our mind is tuned to that. So there is an idea behind, if you go to a holy place, if our mind is ready, if our mind also in the same frequency, you can feel at home in a holy place. On the other hand, when you go to a holy place and you feel terribly disturbed, some people may feel terribly disturbed because the mind is not attuned with the place. In fact, places also acquire characteristics. It could not be physically verified, but a place in which good thoughts are thought, good words are spoken, good actions are done, the place also acquires a kind of a special quality of environment and circumstances. And a person with a spiritual inclination goes there, he feels at home. Otherwise, the opposite way also happens. So that's the idea behind. Of course, we already discussed the 17th verse. Jyoti shamabhita jyoti tamasapparamuchyade jnanam jneyam jnanagamyam hridi sarvasya vishtidam. This Atman that is present everywhere, it is described as the light of all lights. We discussed this in the light of that important dialogue between Gargi and Yajnavalkya from the 4th chapter of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The sunlight, the moonlight, the fire, the candles, even all our vocal cords, our ability to hear and speak and see, and all these can function only If there is a light of all light, that is Atman present in all of us. It is the Atman that is within all of us, that is the light of all lights. So it's called Jyotisham Abhi Tad Jyoti in this particular verse. So we discussed all this earlier, but I wanted to put together these verses from 7 to 18. These 11 verses are very important. Now we are entering into another subject, in the 18th verse. Idi kshetram tatha jnanam jneyam cha uktam samasataha madbhakta edat vijnaya madbhavaya upapadyate. Lord Krishna says, so I have already explained to you kshetram, that is the nature of this empirical material world, and also how to live in this world and acquire spiritual qualities, and how to gradually realize our own deathless dimension, our own true dimension. And when we realize this, we actually transcend death. I mentioned this earlier, If you go to any hospitals, especially people who are extremely sick, if they think there is something yet in store for them, a better future, a better day, in any tradition for the matter, they feel a great comfort. On the other hand, if you tell, no, with this body everything is gone, they will die immediately. So everyone, even the most cutthroat atheist, sometimes, if they may not express it, may look for something other than this physical body, which they know for sure will be destroyed, will be burned, will be pushed through the tube, and that will be the end of the story. So far the body is concerned. So there is always an urge to look for something beyond this body. There's always an urge, actually. Actually, every higher aspiration, urge, is really an attempt to look beyond the body. If we can define ourselves as the physical body, we are not very different. We need not be very different from animals, actually speaking. Aesthetics, music, great music I'm talking about. There are many types of music which are very physical. I'm talking about higher music, literature, philosophy, mysticism, all these great painting, all these which are higher. Which somehow, you can, as I mentioned earlier, a great painter can also get a peep of the transcendental when he crosses the boundary of the empirical, and when he enters into the realm of the transcendental, and that's his level when he enters the realm of the higher painting. That is true in literature, music, poetry, everything. So actually we are looking for our own deathless dimension. Deathless means what? Beyond the body, that's all. Death affects only the human body. If we can think of our true identity beyond death, then this body is nothing. Nothing but something that comes and goes. It comes and goes, so it's nothing. So that's why Lord Krishna promised to Arjuna, I shall teach you your own deathless dimension. Yajnatva amrutamasnude. Nyayam yatat pravakshami yajnatva amrutamasnude. I am going to teach you that, by learning which you will realize your own deathless dimension. And then the 18th verse tells you that once you understand the nature of this world and the disciplines to go beyond this world, beyond this body, and then you will realize your own amrutattvam, your own deathless dimension, your own eternal nature. And those who realize this, they become liberated, they become spiritually enlightened, spiritually emancipated. Then we have 19th verse. So we can have interaction now. We are asked interested in questions, most welcome. Yeah.
Swamiji, thank you for the lecture, first of all. You mentioned the idea of this deathless dimension being beyond the senses, beyond the mind, beyond concepts, ideation, all that. And you mentioned Hindu epistemology. So first of all, I'm curious about, I don't know how much you want to go into it, but the differentiations of Hindu epistemology, say, versus, you mentioned Aristotle, but also how does the Atman actually experience this if it's beyond the senses,
Yeah, true.
Okay.
So, it's said very clearly, Atman, knowledge of Atman is an experiential realization. It is not knowledge. So any knowledge that you get using the tools of epistemology, it be sensory knowledge, where mind and different senses are used, different senses of perception are used. But when we read this book, we are making use of epistemology. That's true. That's true. When you go to the church or a temple to pray, the car you are using, actually your mind is employed when you drive to the place. When you sit there also your mind and your physical body are employed. But when you pray and when you experience something within your heart, a kind of inner fulfillment, that cannot be explained. Anything that can be explained in terms of empirical knowledge will be by its very nature limited. That's a fact. Sri Ramakrishna, in his simple language, he says, it's just like you write a thesis or give a long lecture on milk, or you drink a glass of milk every day, little milk, and you get nourishment. So, but really, can we actually explain even the taste of milk? No. We cannot really explain any experience. In reality, any experience by its very nature is beyond explanation. But still we try to make many efforts to explain many experiences at the empirical level. I was happy, I was unhappy, I was sad, and I felt bored, and so on. True. But in reality, even that empirical, very ordinary human experience cannot be actually explained. There is always a line of demarcation between all your explanations to explain an experience and experience itself. And it's much more true when it comes to spirituality. The sense of fulfillment that you feel when you pray, when you read a great book, that cannot be actually explained. Because when you explain, you can make the other person understand it. You drink a glass of milk and you can't make another man understand the real taste that you had when you drank a glass of milk. So even empirical experiences are beyond explanation. So this is an important thing to remember. That metaphor we can use even while explaining higher spiritual experiences. So in reality, you find in Vedanta, the more and more you even try to intellectually understand that there is one divine that is present in all of us and everywhere, the more you try to understand even intellectually, try to convince yourself. There is a line of demarcation, a gap between your intellectual conviction and what you actually feel in your heart. But still, intellectual convictions can help you to slowly bridge the gap between intellect and experience, or its emotional level itself. So that's why you feel more and more of your own human qualities when you intellectually connect with this idea of the fundamental unity of existence or creation. So that again cannot really be explained. Epistemology is meant for only physical sciences. Physical, I will include philosophy also. Actually, Vedanta tells you, even this book I am discussing now, the higher spirituality, that book itself is not the highest truth. The experience of the truths enshrined or explained in this book, that experience is the highest. Everything is an approximation. That's the uniqueness of Vedanta. Vedanta doesn't tell you one book is everything. No. Absolutely no. The book is certainly important because it helps you to drive away all wrong ideas from our mind. It's certainly helpful. But finally we have to reach the destination in the depth of our own heart. That's why Lord Krishna never tells you to go to a temple and pray, do puja, nothing. He just tells you, you get all these human qualities. So all these qualities can be found in the preambles of constitution of many of the democratic countries of the world. All this we mentioned really. They're all highly idealistic qualities expected of every citizen, every country in modern democracy, in the highest perfection. But Lord Krishna says they are essentially spiritual qualities. So when you acquire all them, you are actually transforming the whole world into a temple, because you feel the divine everywhere. So that's the idea behind. The greatness of Gita is, it has got such a spiritual dimension to what we normally call secular. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
So with these spiritual qualities, are the qualities actually obtained by having this experience, or the qualities are cultivated and that makes you more likely to have the experiences, or can it be both?
Yeah. In fact, Shankaracharya, he makes a very powerful statement in the second chapter, in his commentary on the second chapter. Vestita Prakyas, when Lord Krishna gives a list of the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person, all the characteristics which define a spiritually enlightened person, then Shankaracharya says, these are the qualities that every spiritual seeker, every aspirant should try to practice and perfect. So they are the qualities that everyone should strive to practice and perfect. And they become second nature to the enlightened person. They become natural to the enlightened person. They are the characteristics to be acquired by those who are striving for enlightenment. That's the idea. Okay. Thank you. So thank you for these questions and interesting discussions. So we'll continue. Yeah. This is an important announcement. Thank you. It's an announcement that is, we will have no class next Friday, just the day after Thanksgiving. It's already mentioned in our bulletin, but I wanted to remind you, next week there will be no class, just the day after Thanksgiving. So I wish everyone, all of you, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. Right.